Welcome to Get Rich Education. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. First, home prices rose. Now rents are surging. And in many markets, it's super difficult to even find a place to rent. Learn about what is really going on in the rental market now. Then, Rich Dad sales advisor Blair Singer helps take us on a mindset journey to get that little voice inside your head to tell you just what you want it to and why, even if you're not in sales, you really are. Sales is your number one skill. Today on Get Rich Education. The people that our listeners can't stop talking about are Ridge Lending Group, NMLS 42056. They've provided GRE listeners with more loans than anyone, and it's where I got my last few loans. They finance single-family income property up to fourplexes. They're the number one lender for beginners and veterans. Start your pre-qualification, chat with President Chaley Ridge personally, and get your custom plan for expanding your cash-flowing portfolio. Start at ridgelendinggroup.com. A lot of investors choose either cash flow or home price appreciation, but one real estate market could provide both. Jacksonville, Florida, with 27% lower home prices than the national median and 1% higher rents, their market has appreciated 34% more than other comparable cash flow markets over the last 30 years. Get positive cash flow today and appreciation for tomorrow. They often have available inventory in Jacksonville. Start at cashflowandgrowth.com.
You're listening to the show that has created more financial freedom than nearly any show in the world. This is Get Rich Education.
Welcome to GRE, from Fairfield, Connecticut to Fairbanks, Alaska, and across 188 nations worldwide. I'm Keith Weinhold. This is Get Rich Education at summer solstice. I'm going to use my sales style with our guest today, and he's going to tell me what kind of salesman I am. But first, rents are up. Last week, I told you why rent increases usually lag behind home price increases. Home price increases typically take place first in an appreciating environment. Previously, I told you about how rent prices have now begun to soar in a lot of metros, and I gave you some data there a few weeks ago. More anecdotally, I just talked to one of my property managers in the southeastern United States. He manages 420 properties, and he told me that it's just astounding, and he used a number of other adjectives, because he's had effectively zero vacancy since March of 2020. That's essentially 100% occupancy since the health crisis began. I'm going to guess that he still had a few days of economic vacancy here and there at tenant turns and such. Maybe it's really 99% plus. But in any case, what is really going on out there with this rental surge? What I'm seeing myself is that with home values first going way up and stretching out there ahead of a lot of people's capacity to pay for it, it's pushed out that first-time affordable home buyer. It's removed them from qualifying to get into that market and make a home theirs. So those wannabe home buyers then need to rent. The cost of building a new home has also put the affordability out of reach for many. So what they're doing is they're renting now and then hoping to buy a move-up home later in life. You could see more and more of this effect continue to happen as home prices keep rising fast at 15 to 20% year over year in a lot of these markets. Even if the home price rise, if those gains slow down to 5 or 10% year over year, well, they're still already up at an elevated level where those wannabe home buyers cannot afford them. So then more rental demand means, of course, that you can ask for higher rent increases, and higher rent increases can then mean in turn that rent to value ratios on these income properties become more and more attractive for you, because for a while, rent increases have not kept up proportionally to those higher capital housing prices. The good thing is that quality rental homes are being put to market on GREturnkey.com, which allows for homeowner-style living that people can still rent. oftentimes for many years. And I've been talking more about the rental market and rent increases on another channel that works better when it comes to showing you the numbers and helping break that down for you in a visual format. And that's on our Get Rich Education YouTube channel, so you can learn more there. Also, the term that I coined a year or two ago, the inflation triple crown, well, a new 3-part video series about how real estate investors win the inflation triple crown was just finished publishing over there on our YouTube channel last week. As you know, a real estate investor wins with price inflation. The second one is debt debasement. The third is cash flow enhancement. That's the inflation triple crown that you win when you have a mortgage loan tied to cash flowing properties. So there's really some great free visual learning now at our Get Rich Education YouTube channel. Check that out. Next here, Blair Singer makes his GRE podcast debut. Blair is Rich Dad Poor Dad author Robert Kiyosaki's sales advisor. Look, the only thing standing between you and your goal is the BS story that you keep telling yourself as to why you can't achieve it. That, in fact, is a quote. That's what Jordan Belfort, the Wolf of Wall Street, said, and that's what Blair and I are going to discuss. And Jordan Belfort, when he said that quote, he didn't say BS either. I shortened it to BS. And you know what BS means on a squeaky clean lyric show like this, right? It's blue sky. Don't let anyone say you some blue sky. I mean, what else could BS possibly stand for anyway? Let's talk about motivation and sales skill with Blair Singer. This week's guest realized that early on, in order to get what he wanted from business and life, it all begins with mastering the chatter between his ears, which he calls his little voice. It's allowed him and thousands of others to really achieve pretty incredible things in their lives. He's gone on to create a worldwide reputation as an expert in sales and business growth. He has a personal development academy and a network of licensees. He's the founder and CEO of the Blair Singer Training Academy, an in-demand international public speaker, and author of 3 best-selling books that you probably heard of: Sales Dogs, Team Code of Honor, and Little Voice Mastery. He is the Rich Dad sales advisor as well. In fact, he was the very first Rich Dad advisor. Welcome to GRE, Blair Singer.
Thank you, Keith. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
You are a master of controlling your little voice, that little voice inside your head, and how that can dictate so much of one's patterns and behaviors and expectations and emotions. Tell us more about mastering your little voice.
Anybody that does not know what the little voice is, it's that thing inside your head that just said, "What little voice?" That's the one. That's the one. And we all have it. It's a chatter that goes on that sometimes second guesses your decisions, will shoot holes in any dreams that you have if you're not careful. But one thing that I learned in my partnership with Robert all these years is that technical development and learning how to make money and learning how to just do something is really pretty simple. The hard part is dealing with the resistance that we naturally have to making change between your ears. And so all the years of personal development, growth, and mentoring and coaching, finally put it into a book so people could help themselves.
When it comes to mastering that little voice, Blair, maybe I can give you an example. You can tell me what you think about this, at least when I'm coming from a positive place. And I think a lot of our listeners and viewers can relate to this. Everyone's always being pulled in all these different directions. I'm pulled in a lot of different directions in my life. And that might be, I've got 12 emails to return over here, and my property manager in Alabama needs a decision on a property, and I see the landscapers are screwing up out in my yard, and my windows still haven't been washed, and my shoulders have been exercised in 8 days, and I'm being pulled in so many different directions that I think one little voice technique I've told myself that's helped with that is I am a manager of situations. That's the best way I can describe my life a lot of times, at least when I'm trying to be productive. I try to positively tell myself, Keith, you're a capable manager of situations. Is that part of the little voice?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because you've accomplished probably the first most important task in managing, and that is to realize that you have a little voice, and the little voice is not necessarily the real you. Most people operate on autopilot, and all that dialogue going on in their head, they believe it all, and they make bad decisions based upon it, particularly in decisions when they're emotionally charged, which is never a good time to make a decision. So yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about. And sometimes you got to talk yourself off the ledge. You got a lot of things going on. That's called overwhelm. Some people never recover from overwhelm and they stay small. And in the rich dad lingo, they stay in the E quadrant. They stay in the S quadrant because they can't manage the complexity because their little voices just go wild with it. That's why one of the things that we do is to help people get from the left side of the quadrant over to the right side.
Yes, we're talking about the rich dad cash flow quadrant, where on the left side, we have the employee and the self-employed. And over on the right side, we have the B for the big business, the I for the investor. So oftentimes, if someone does not have good control of the little voice in their head, they tend to be more of an employee and therefore have other people manage them and manage their situations for them.
Yeah, that's part of it. But even more insidious than that is that a person like that tends to believe, and this is the problem, they tend to believe that they're not capable of doing it. They tend to believe that because there's so much complexity and they can't handle it, that it's just not for them. I'm not genetically designed to be an entrepreneur, to be an investor, which is completely untrue. I mean, if that were true, Robert and I would never be in this whole genre. When you learn that, in fact, how do you overcome all the complexity? Well, you have a team. That's what it takes to be a bigger business owner and an investor. You have teams. But if your little voice says things like, if you want it done right, you got to do it yourself. I got to be able to manage myself first. Okay. That is going to keep you small for the rest of your life because your person only has so much bandwidth. But an entrepreneur understands that to multiply your efforts requires more people.
Yeah, this is some really important mindset stuff when it begins with your little voice. You're kind of setting the table for your own life design. I think on the negative side, when one's little voice gets them down, they're always telling themselves, they're not enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not good looking enough. I don't have enough money. I'm not old enough. That's a lot of like the negative talk. Both Robert Kiyosaki and Brian Tracy have told me things through their books that really helped change that little voice in my head. Robert Kiyosaki said being wealthy is a choice. And that's so simple. And I actually didn't believe it the first time that I read it. Now I know that it's true. And Brian Tracy said most people don't obtain wealth because it doesn't occur to them that they can. That is so simple, but there is truth and profundity in both of those statements.
Oh, absolutely. But I would also say this is the average person, when given those statements, they just summarily discard them.
Right.
They just don't even believe them. You happen to be a person that was open, receptive, and was willing to take the next step to investigate it. A lot of people don't. And here's the other thing I'm going to say is the little voice is there for a reason. It's part of your brain that's there. It's really designed to protect you. It's designed to keep you from hurting yourself, from being scorned, from being criticized, from being hurt, all these things. So it keeps you in this nice, tight little box. Because if you don't venture out, you're not going to get hurt, which is not necessarily true, but that's the belief system that goes with it. That's why over all the years and working over 40 countries around the world, and I've probably been on the road in front of more audiences than probably any of the advisors combined, is I have always found that most people way underestimate themselves. They have no concept of what they're capable of, but if you give them the right tools and they get a glimpse of what they can do, they're home free as far as I'm concerned.
That's right. Yeah. One's little voice, it ought to be telling you that you are underrated in so many different ways. So a lot of one's little voice mastery helps people essentially create their future. And you help a lot of people in the trainings create their future. So can you tell us or really bring some context to that concept of creating your future? What do you mean by that?
One of my mentors, one of Robert's mentors, for many of us, was a fellow by the name of Dr. Buckminster Fuller.
Yeah.
Bucky Fuller, right? And he died in July of, I think, 1983. But he was an inventor, engineer, author, philosopher. And he said something I never forget. He goes, "We are meant to be architects of our future, not victims of our future. We're meant to be architects of the future, not its victims." That always struck me. And as I learned more of what he was talking about, I learned that in order to really create your future, There are processes to do it, one of which is called PERT, Project Evaluation Review Technique, which you don't need to remember, but designed by the United States Navy back in the 50s to build Polaris missiles and put a man on the moon and all that stuff. But it was a process that a few of us in Honolulu, where I met Robert, we all learned this process. And it was a process by which we built our businesses, we built our fortunes, we taught other people how to do this. It was a high performance technique for high performance entrepreneurs. Basic premise is based on this, is that once you set a goal for yourself, which we all know about setting goals, you set a goal for yourself. Typically what most people will do, they're over here, and they say, well, what's the first step I got to do to get over there? But the way PERT works is you start in the future and you work your way backwards from the future back to the present to design it the way you want it. And what it does, it reveals all the gaps, all the holes, all the pitfalls that you're going to encounter before you even start, which is very, very powerful. If I could just say one more thing about it, Keith, is I was doing some research that in 2020, last year, 2020, more new businesses were started in America, over 4.5 million new businesses in that year, in the middle of a pandemic, which was 5 times the annual average, even while people were locked down. Now, what we also know is the statistics don't change. Is like easily over half of them fail in the first 3 to 5 years. But here's the interesting piece, Keith, and that is this. Of all the reasons they fail, only 20% is because of the competition. What's that mean? That means that 80% of the reason entrepreneurs fail is self-inflicted. It's either their little voice, they don't know how to raise capital, they don't know how to build teams, they don't know how to create a roadmap into the future. Very powerful. So we're releasing that product here very soon.
When you're beginning with the end in mind, you are more likely to be that well thought out architect than that victim.
That's right. Because see, if you start in the present, you're still shackled by your memory of the past and of the limitations of what you have. The difference between an entrepreneur and a manager is a manager allocates existing resources. An entrepreneur creates something that was never there before. It's a different mindset. Does that make sense?
That is a great distinction. And that distinction would also help someone move from the left side of the cash flow quadrant to the right side.
That's right. But there's a word of caution. And the word of caution is this, is the minute you decide to do that, to take that move into the unknown, you'll face resistance. 2 types. First of all, when you push into anything, it's going to resist back. You know, ideas, other people's dreams, other people's ideas, all that stuff, you're going to face resistance. That's a given. Okay. That's the external, like the headwind of an airplane, right? You got to face the headwind. The other form of resistance is, of course, as we mentioned, your little voice. Can I do this? Is it possible? Maybe it's not for me. Who do I think I am? Nobody would want to read my book anyway. All of those kinds of things. So a person that wants to be an architect of their future, they've got to be prepared to deal with the resistance and push, as Brian Tracy and Robert would say, to be able to push through that membrane, because once you get to the other side, it's a whole new world.
So we talk about what's guiding one onto the other side, being that architect of their future, going from the left side of the cash flow quadrant, which is more of an employee mindset, over to the right side. Should one's little voice really be instilling a sense of fear in them a bit? Therefore, can fear actually be a guide? Because if you're feeling fear and your little voice is telling you these things that it's never told you before, is that actually a good guide that you're on a growth path in?
Well, that's one way of looking at it for sure, unless it paralyzes you. If it paralyzes you and stops you dead in your tracks, that's not good, okay? But a little bit of fear is a good thing. You know, if you've got a little fear, nervousness, anticipation, I think it was Peyton Manning once said, he goes, that nervousness is good. That means you're about to do something important, something significant. So I think that it's all healthy. I'm a pessimist. I'm an optimist sometimes. But I think all of it is all good as long as you're aware of where the little voice is coming from.
If growth only happens outside the comfort zone, yes, it would seem then, Blair, that some piece of fear would be healthy. You're listening to Get Rich Education. We're talking with Blair Singer about sales and speaking with the strongest little voice you could possibly have in your head. We're coming back with more. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. You know, starting in real estate seems hard for some. Even experienced investors can find it difficult to achieve the success that they had hoped for. What if there was one small change everyone could make that would solve these challenges? Allie Boone offers a book that really no one else has. It's an easy-to-understand glimpse into the real estate investing industry and your mindset. It's life lessons on hacking your mind before you hack your wallet. Her book to grab on Amazon is called Not Your How-To Guide to Real Estate Investing. Hey, is your IRA in a real estate syndication? Yikes, a 37% UBIT tax could hit you, but you still have a chance to set up your EQRP and avoid this. Did you make too much money in 2020 and need more deductions? Now federal law lets you set up an EQRP in 2021 and get deductions for last year, retroactively. Even put old IRA and 401k money in Bitcoin, gold, or your own business. Get control of all of your retirement money, tax and penalty free. Text EQRP in all capital letters to 72,000.
This is Richard Duncan, publisher of Macro Watch. Listen to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold, and don't quit your daydream.
You're listening to the show that's created more financial freedom for busy people just like you than nearly any show in the world. This is Get Rich Education. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. We're talking with Rich Dad sales advisor Blair Singer about all things sales and mindset as well. You can learn more about him at blairsinger.com. Blair, you are the Rich Dad sales advisor. You say that the number one skill in life is selling. Robert Kiyosaki says every entrepreneur needs to be good in sales. Ken McElroy says that sales solves nearly every problem. So tell us about how one becomes a better salesperson and just what the relevance of this is in one's life, Blair.
The reason sales is number one is really simple, because sales equals income. Sales equals income in business. If you can't sell, there's no income. You have no income. You have no business. You have no business. You have no fun, and you're out. So sales is number one. The problem is the toughest sale of all, as we referred to earlier, the toughest sale of all is not selling to a customer or selling a product or selling online. The toughest sale of all is you selling you to you. As an entrepreneur, when times get tough, can you sell yourself to keep going? Can you when a customer says no to you, do you run away with your tail between your legs, or do you learn from it, get stronger, get bigger, and take on the next challenge? So sales is your number one skill for sure. People say, well, I'm not that kind of a person. I can't do that. Look, I have never met a 4 or 5 year old on the planet that couldn't sell. Kids know how to sell. Everybody knows how to do it. The problem is people's concern about what other people think about it. That's what typically gets in the way.
Right. A 4 or 5 year old trying to sell lemonade at a stand, they don't have, I guess, the social awareness yet to know that you might be making that person feel uncomfortable, like they have to buy something that they don't want. But then we reach a certain age where we do have that feeling and we don't want to make others uncomfortable. The title of one of your books is Sales Dogs. Maybe some people think, you have to be a vicious dog and you really need to be aggressive to make sales. But I think in a lot of your material, Blair, you're here to tell us that that's not necessarily true. In fact, if that's not innately the real you shouldn't do that at all. What are your thoughts?
You hit it right on the head, Keith. That's exactly right. Is that Sales Dogs, the subtitle of that book is you do not have to be an attack dog to be successful in sales or exploit your income. And what we identified in the book is there's 5 different selling personalities. One is the pit bull, which is what we're talking about, the attack dog, the stereotypical never take no for an answer person. But it ranges all the way to the charming poodle that loves to connect with people and network with people, the retriever who loves to serve, the chihuahua who loves the technology and the data, and the big droop-eyed basset hound. They love you no matter what. These are the people that build excellent one-on-one rapport. And the evidence is it doesn't matter which breed you are, you can make millions in your business. The key, as you said, is to be who you are. Don't try to be like me. You don't want people to try to be like you. You don't want to try get people to be somebody other than who they are. And when you can do that, people then love, trust, respect, and like you, and then they'll buy from you.
Because people would be able to feel when you're not being yourself anyway, right? Like the attack dog, for example. I don't think I'm an attack dog. I would think that if someone's selling and being the real them, then to them, when they're actually selling something, it probably shouldn't even feel like they're selling.
That's right. You're basically just helping people. Just find out what people want, find out what they need, and help them get it. That's it. That's all that sales is. People throw all kinds of other things on top of it to make it more complicated, but it really is that simple. In 2020, when everybody got locked down and everybody went to camera, now you had to add technology to it. Otherwise, you're out of the business. You have to be able to communicate. And it also, luckily for us, based on our training, is that now your ability to broadcast one to many rather than one-on-one is very, very powerful, which is something Robert and I have been practicing since the mid-'80s when we started learning to do this, is how to broadcast. But sales is still basically the same. We do some programs in which I get people to sell more product of their own product and service in 10 minutes than most of them do in 4 to 6 months. And people don't believe it. They go, how'd that happen? Well, what happens is through drilling, and processing, getting the little voice out of the way, not giving them enough time to think about it, forcing them into the exercise, they get on the phones and they blow people away. I've had groups that have done $10, $20 million of sales in 10 minutes. That's the potential that's there. Once you can get the little voice out of the way. So you see how the two drive together? Because the people that can't sell, it's a little voice issue. That's all it is. Once you pluck that thing out, wealth abounds.
You're giving us some great guidance here, Blair, and a lot of the best guidance is the simple stuff. And that's something Robert Kiyosaki wants in a Rich Dad Advisor, his longest time Rich Dad Advisor, because you're making it really simple here. I picked up on something really important, I think you said, and that is just go help people. You don't have to think of it as you've got to sell this. Just go help people and see what happens. I don't know what kind of sales dog I am, Blair. Maybe you can tell me, but let me just give you an example. I tend to think of if I were trying to sell something, well, just like the normal me is to be an educator and to bring enthusiasm. I kind of think of it as those two things. For example, there's one time that I was trying to sell a fourplex building of mine that I had, and I was talking to the owner of a $200,000 duplex, and I was pointing out that they could just trade up that $200,000 duplex for my $500,000 fourplex that I'm trying to sell with little or no money from their own pocket. And there were some objections there. That person said things like, oh, well, then I would have to take on more debt. I'd have to take on a bigger loan if I move from a $200,000 duplex up to a $500,000 fourplex. And my point is, yes, you would need to take on more debt, but in a cash flowing property, either way, all that debt's outsourced to a tenant. So let's look at your upside. And really what you can do is get more cash flow. You'll have a $500,000 asset to appreciate rather than just a $200,000 asset to appreciate. More doors, more tax benefits, and you can do this with something called a 1031 exchange. I'm educating here, Blair. That way, no equity is lost. Equity is merely transferred from your duplex to your fourplex, all tax-free. You're actually moving closer to financial freedom. That's what you really want. And see, I'm doing the same thing that you're doing in a sense because I want to trade up this fourplex to a 10plex the same way. So you actually have the ability to do just what I'm doing, but at a different scale. So I think this is why I say, Blair, that I come across with education and enthusiasm. That's my sales style. So can you fit one of those dogs to me?
And a tremendous amount of energy. And the one thing that we say in sales is that two people come together in a selling situation, person with highest energy usually wins. And that's you. So I would say that if I were going to look at the breeds of sales dog, you're definitely a retriever because you love to educate, you love to serve people. I'd say you're a bit of a chihuahua because you have all the facts and the figures all lined up really well, and you're a great communicator. Believe it or not, all those things really take practice to master. And I find it really strange that people will want to play golf and they'll go out there and hit a golf ball forever and ever and ever and ever and practice to play a game of golf, but they don't practice to sell. And so one of the reasons that we have success is we teach people how to drill handling objections. Practice. So when you have to give a presentation or a pitch, practice. Here's the format. Just follow it. And within a very short period of time, they're going, wow, this is so easy. Yeah, it's easy. But you got to, like you said, it's simple and you practice the steps. And obviously you've done a great job of that yourself.
Now, when it comes to sales, I think it's easier for one to be a salesperson, right? When they kind of eat their own cooking. For example, with that, for instance, that I just gave with the duplex to the fourplex, that's how I came up with the fourplex, trading up from a smaller building. And I'm kind of doing the same thing. I want to trade up from a fourplex to a 10plex. So that prospective buyer of my fourplex would basically be eating my own cooking. How important is it really to believe in or actually use the product that you're trying to sell?
I think it's everything. You really need to speak to your level of experience. And if you don't have the experience, disclose that up front. Okay. It doesn't mean that you're locked out of the market. It just means, look, I've never done a deal like this before. I've been trained by Kiyosaki and Ken McElroy and blah, blah, blah. As a matter, I'll give you a real quick, interesting story. I've been a real estate investor for a long time, and not to the level of Ken and Robert, but 3-bedroom, 2-bath, duplex, small apartments, all that kind of stuff. And so I wanted to make a bigger jump. We're at a trade show, all the advisors, and I wanted to do a bigger property. And so Ken McElroy, we're sitting there, and he holds up his phone. And he goes, "I found you the perfect property." I go, "What is it?" It was a church. And the reason a church was great is because churches use their thing on the weekend, and then I'd have the building to do my programs in during the week, and I could sublet all that stuff. It was $3.5 million, right? Now, I'd never done a $3.5 million real estate deal before. I looked at it and I went, "Like that?" And you know what he said to me? He looks at me and he goes, "Blair, now what's your little voice saying?" So he threw it right back at me, right? And the game was on. But for me, with great mentorship with him and with Tom and everybody, we were able to take down that building. And we had that building for 6 years. Great return to all of our investors. We had about 15 investors in that building. I didn't put up any money for it. And so sales, if you can't sell, you can't raise capital either. And what may be holding a person back from an illustrious real estate future may be that little voice thought, "Well, I got to use my own money and I can't who's going to listen to me? And I've never done a deal that big before." Look, the credibility that I had when I went to all my investors is my board of directors, which were the other advisors. It's like, these are the guys that are advising me. And so it was great. And we sold the building, luckily, before the whole thing crashed. They got their money back plus a nice return. So I think that sales, as Robert said, is the most critical skill of all, particularly if you want to advance in real estate.
Yeah, 100%. We've given a lot of really simple things for us to keep in mind, Blair. And I love it when it's simple, because when it's simple, it's easy to remember. If our audience wants to connect with you and learn more about how to improve their sales skill, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, the best way you allude to is just go to blairsinger.com, and we have hundreds of hours of amazing videos that'll teach you how to sell, how to build championship teams, how to get your little voice out of the way. And also go to our YouTube channel, same name, and subscribe and share some of those with your friends, because there's no excuse in this day and age, Keith, to run around confused. There's really no excuse. There is so much good information, but as Robert says, you got to be able to discern the good from the fake. Do you have real teachers that have really been there, really done that? Or are these people just speaking based upon their last 6 months of experience? So I think that if people want more information, just go to blairsinger.com and check it out. There's a lot of great material there.
He is the Rich Dad Advisor for Sales, Blair Singer. Thanks so much for coming on to the show.
Thank you, Keith.
Oh yeah, some great mindset material with Blair Singer. One thing that I learned from him in this conversation is that only 20% of businesses fail due to competition. That's remarkable. The other 80% fail due to problems from within, which is really often from what's going on inside the head of the founder. So that's really the relevance of Little Voice Mastery here. Again, you can learn more about Blair and everything that he does to help you become better at sales at blairsinger.com. Coming up on the Jerry podcast here in future weeks, the most recurrent guest in show history is going to keep extending his lead, because Rich Dad tax advisor Tom Wheelwright is coming back to tell us about the latest, freshest, and the newest on today's tax climate and Joe Biden's tax plan. Also, legendary investor Jim Rogers will join me from Singapore, probably even before Tom is here. And then further down the road, Tom Wheelwright and I will be here again together. We're going to discuss the relevance of how environmental concerns have crept into real estate and investing, and how you can use green tax benefits to your advantage. All that and more coming up on the show here with a powerhouse lineup of guests. And really, one of those was Blair Singer. And if I can sum up his little voice mastery from what he told us today with my own takeaway, and it comes to you designing your future, I think that there are just 4 important words for you to remember. You are your expectations. Until next week, I've got to tell you, I really appreciate your long-time devoted following and listenership here. That truly means the world to me. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Don't quit your daydream.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.
The preceding program was brought to you by your home for wealth building, GetRichEducation.com.